Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I'm going to give you an update of the front lines and a little bit of discussion about sort of things going on. I've been away for a day. I hope you haven't missed me too much. The weekend and all that. So what's been happening? Well, let's have a look at the map. The map looks relatively unchanged. Okay, things are moving at a snail's pace in the Kherson region and not moving a lot along the Oskil River. A little bit of movement in Lyman. Well, actually not too much in Lyman, but around the Izium area, they have regained some territory, the Ukrainians. And the Russians are sort of pushing on in the Bakhmut area a little bit and reinforcing areas down here. But let's just discuss all that. And we'll start up in the north in the Kharkiv area, or going into Luhansk now, and we have the Oskil River, which, as I said before, seems to be the defensive line that the Russians have taken. Now, the odd thing here is that the Ukrainians really could break through those lines relatively easily. These aren't particularly heavily defended, and there are a lot of people questioning why the Ukrainians haven't pushed on, why they haven't capitalized on the momentum that they had, and they have stalled, or whatever word you want to use. I guess better to be safe than sorry. There will be, doing things and working things out and getting things super ready, you would think, such that, they're not taking risks that might not pay off, that might be too risky for them. So, as a result, they are consolidating around Kupiansk on the eastern side of Kupiansk, which I talked about before. And broadly speaking, down the Oskil River, you have your defensive line. Around Izium, they are slowly clearing out, as you can see from this map. But if we go to looking a little bit closer, so there's a Kupiansk, the eastern side, the industrial side of the town that they've taken control of, the Ukrainians. And around Izium, they've got sort of commando units working in Ripty, and these other villages and small towns around. The Ukrainians are pushing there. They haven't surprisingly pushed too much in Lyman, so that there are some questions as to why that is. Really, your objectives are going to be these two towns, Starobelsk particularly, as a logistics hub that will affect, transport into the rest of the Donbass. If we look at the Institutes for the Study of War, you can see that the railway links are really super important. And if you can take out Starobelsk, then you are causing the Russians a whole heap of trouble. So that's broadly what's going on there, but not a great amount of movements. If we go back to the larger map, the Ukrainians are putting up some pressure at the northern end here. The Russians are pushing, as they have been for months, in the Bakhmut area and further south. Now, Bakhmut, there are claims that it's been surrounded, claims it's been, it's on the way out. Those kind of Russian claims have been made for months now, and Bakhmut still hasn't fallen. And it's just pretty embarrassing, really, to think that this great army of the Russian army can't even take Bakhmut after several months, and claiming it's going to fall, and the Ukrainians in a couple of days took this entire region. The Russians, no wonder they are pretty embarrassed about this whole last couple of weeks, because they don't come out looking good here. Now, there have been rumours that the Ukrainians are amassing here for possibly a push down to cut these fronts in two, maybe to encircle Donetsk. As a result, the Russians have been reinforcing around here. So there are troops that have been brought to defend here. This is all pretty interesting. So there is some analysis to say, and this is my amazingly well-drawn map, that really this area of all the front lines, the southern area, is the key. Really, the Russians, if push came to shove and they were really under the cosh, they would give up these areas, and arguably Donetsk as well. Ideally, they want to keep the Kherson Oblast and not to be beaten off that area to the west of the Dnipro River here. They don't want to lose that, but they are going to lose that. And this presents a problem for them because really they don't want to lose this at all. They don't want to lose that pumping station here because they don't want to lose fresh water to Crimea. Sevastopol is arguably far more important than Donetsk. Sevastopol is a naval port that provides incredibly important strategic utility for the Russians. Therefore, my opinion would be they want to keep Crimea. At the bare minimum, Russia want to keep Crimea. And in order to keep Crimea, they have to keep this buffer zone here. So I think they would willingly lose all of this area. And actually, you can see that is happening because they are pulling their best troops into this area. This area now has 3/4 of the airborne troops, 3/4 of the naval infantry brigades. Your better, sort of higher quality, higher morale troops. Okay, they're mainly around here. There's a bunch here, and then Kherson. This appears to be their main consideration, and the question is where do you draw the rest of that line? How much are they willing to concede to the Ukrainians, in their worst case scenario? Well, worst case scenario, obviously they'll lose everything, but, other than everything, it's going to be Crimea. Now, there are some theories. Defmon, who's someone on Twitter I follow, has said that the the Kharkiv push. So he says, I think it's possible that the Russians intended to retreat from the Izium area for a while. I do not think the retreat worked out as they planned. I think they were going for defensive positions in the north, unsure where, possibly further south than now. What I'm trying to figure out now is what their intentions are in the south. I don't see the Russians staying west of the Dnipro long term, so that's in Kherson. I think this started a long time ago, and he said back in July 26th, the Borova Township Council, Borova is this area of the Oskil River that I think the Ukrainians might have sort of got there at the moment, just east of the Oskil. According to aerial reconnaissance, the number of Russian occupation troops on the territory of the community has recently decreased significantly. So that was all the way back at the end of July the 26th. I think the Russians, and I agree that they were never going to progress. So is it possible we've seen a repeat of the Kiev retreat? A lot of equipment losses we saw after the Russian withdrawal there were from earlier combat and not losses during a retreat. So the idea is that possibly, as with Kiev, a lot of the equipment that was lost in the retreat from the Kharkiv area was equipment that was damaged, that wasn't their top-notch stuff, that was already sort of had got out, and they were planning on getting a lot more out, but they were just caught off guard. The idea is that they were in a process of doing a slow retreat from here, and Ukraine then hit them. I don't know. Who knows? That's a theory worth considering. I don't know that it makes an awful lot of difference now because they have lost that area, and so it's irrelevant whether they were attempting to retreat or not. They aren't there now, and they lost an absolute shed load of equipment. But as mentioned, it's all seems to be about Kherson. What's happening in Kherson? Well, not a lot again. It's death by 1,000 cuts, as War in Ukraine would say. The YouTube channel is well worth following. Death by 1,000 cuts, I would agree with it. It's just these small snail-paced increases and progress in towards Kherson city and towards the Dnipro River. There are movements, particularly in the north. I believe that Ukraine are doing a pretty good job up here. Less so down here, where they're trying to make some incursions right towards Kherson. So that's what's going up there. As we can see, the Vidi bridgehead here, the salient that's being pushed through there, they are making more progress there and up north. Here, War Mapper says a little bit down here, but it's certainly up north has had the more progress as far as I am aware. Now, there was people who were there were Twitter accounts who were showing loads of video footage of gunfire going on in Kherson. Very interesting. You can see I put it on my Twitter handle, so you can check that out. Now, the question is, what was going on there? Were these actual incursions by Ukrainian troops? No, it doesn't seem so. So was it collaborators? Could have been. Was it Russian on Russian? Some kind of argument going on? Don't know. There are so many different theories as to what that was, but there was certainly a lot of gunfire taking place in Kherson. I think it was last night. So I wonder whether that came to anything or whether it's a flash in the pan, and that's the end of that. So other thing I wanted to just talk about, quite a few things, I guess. One is the Russians are seeking armaments from all over the place. Now, one of the places they are getting armaments, and this is a bit of a challenge actually, is Iran. And they are getting, I think there have been 3 cargo planes that have landed in Moscow from Iran. And these are carrying broadly drones, kamikaze drones, that are causing issues. So the Euromaidan press says Russia's Iranian-made Shahed drones, here we are, creating problems for Ukraine. And the Wall Street Journal wrote an article on that. They destroyed 2 152mm howitzers, 2 122 howitzers, and 2 BTRs, armoured infantry vehicles in one brigade, commander says. So that's just in one brigade. These drones are causing problems. For the fourth time in a week, a cargo plane from Iran has touched down in Moscow. Each one thought to contain over 100 modern drones plus other equipment. So Russia is getting around the sanctions, making them unable to make, their own equipment by buying equipment off Iran and some of their other nefarious allies. Philip O'Brien says, just a guess, but if the Russians try to hold the Oskil without sending more forces, it will tax them. So this is going back to the Kharkiv region, that river coming down. So if they try to hold that, it will cause them a lot of problems. It's too big a front. The only problem is that if they abandon the Oskil, they are basically abandoning Lyman and those logistic lines. So this is going back to, yes, I see that they will abandon this. They've probably got quite light resistance because they are concentrating on this area. And I don't know how far they'll be willing to come down here, but Severodonetsk could be given up, and you could give up a bunch of places here. It's all dependent on logistics. How do they get logistics into here? If they're coming from Russia, then as lots of equipment is bought from broadly up here, they're going to have to come all the way around to take it around there, and that's just a bit of a headache for them. I mean, it's doable, but it's clearly not ideal. So anyway, that was a little bit of sort of analysis from Philip O'Brien, sort of questioning what's going on there. There have been some good pieces of good news. So here, another Wagner base destroyed by Ukraine. So this is in Luhansk region. Again, for those who don't know, Luhansk region is up here. So a Wagner group. So they're attacking Bakhmut here. Wagner are, they are a threat to the Ukrainians. They're half decent troops, or they appear to be the ones doing the most, causing the biggest thorn in the side of the Ukrainians on that front, at least. So that's another base destroyed there, supposedly with a number of people killed. Now, going back to the Kherson, this is rather interesting. So this is from the General Staff, Ukrainian General Staff. Russian military prepares ways of retreat in Kherson Oblast. Now, the HIMARS and artillery keep hitting bridges, pontoon bridges, ferries. So how do they get around this? If they need to get equipment and men off from the west of the Dnipro River, how do they do that? How do they get them across the Dnipro River? Well, specifically, Russian troops sank 9 railroad cars near the Kakhovka hydropower plant in order to build a crossing on the Dnieper. There are so many alternative spellings of words. It depends whether you use the Russian or the Ukrainian, and so on and so forth. And because the sound is that the Ukrainians have an I where the Russians don't, and hence the Ukrainians are using the I as a sign of resistance in places by painting the I a bit like the Russians use the Z, because and they using that letter because the Russians don't have it. So that's pretty cool. So this is what the Ukrainian General Staff said. So they've sunk a bunch of railroad cars, presumably to use as a foundation for some kind of bridge that might have a little bit more, I don't know, sustainability than a pontoon. So there you have it. Again, Ukraine claims it has killed possibly up to 200 of Russia's Chechen soldiers in a strike in Kherson. The Petrivsky plant was hit yesterday. Sources told Ukrainian intel that Russian equipment was kept there and that Kadyrovites lived in a dormitory next door. So that's all really good news. Now, who are these Kadyrovites? Well, the word comes from Ramzan Kadyrov, who is the Chechen leader. Where's Chechnya, where you've got a lot of history here. I won't go into this, but the Russians have been involved in 2 Chechen wars, and you expect the Chechens to be fully against Russia, but actually there are a lot of pro-Kremlin, pro-Moscow, pro-Russia Chechens, and is that all down to money? 80% of their money comes from directly for Chechnya comes directly from Moscow, and so there's going to be money involved. But there are Chechens fighting for the Russians. There are also Chechens fighting against the Russians, and so that which is representative of the issues going on in Chechnya. But these are thought to be, pretty vicious, highly regarded fighters in some circles. However, there is a joke that you keep seeing these videos of Chechen fighters on TikTok, and they're basically just firing their guns into the air as if, and they're using techniques and tactics that any decent force wouldn't use, and it's all just for show. So there's an argument that a lot of the Chechen fighting is almost for show, some kind of bravado, these TikTok warriors, as they are accused of being. And actually, Kadyrov has been a little bit critical of Moscow and their tactics and lack of success recently, and so he's none too happy. But Chechens are fighting for the Russians. But if this is to believe, then that's a pretty big loss for them, losing 200 up to 200. So again, the question is always, how true is that? And the last bit of conversation I want to sort of delve into is the defense of Ukraine, which is a government's Twitter account. And the reason I mention this is all part of the communication war, right? Ukraine are winning the information war, hands down. So they have done such a good job, with Zelensky himself included, at managing the information throughout the whole conflict, to be honest. But what they are really good at is trolling. And Defense of Ukraine, I'll just show you 2 tweets. They're just lovely little bits of trolling, and they do this all the time. They troll the Russians. So here, announcement: the newest Russian tank, the T-90M. So there are these range of tanks that are being used by the Russians, down to the T-62s, which are from the 1960s, and they've bought them out of retirement, and they're getting used on the battlefield and getting blown up on the battlefield. So here we have the newest version with the T-90M, a lot more technology in. The newest Russian tank, T-90M, was found in Kharkiv region in perfect condition. We ask its owner to contact the Ukrainian army. Please identify yourself by a sign, a white flag. Okay, nice little tweet just to say, we've got your best tank, right? And there aren't so many of these compared to all the other tanks. And we've got one in perfect working condition. And here are all the pictures of it in perfect working condition. And if you want it back, please give us a sign, preferably a white flag. And then, but one from the other day was particularly glorious, is this one. In the past week, the Ukrainian army received thousands of tons of ammunition as a gift from the armed forces of Russia. Please note that we do not accept gifts from murderers, torturers, looters or rapists. In the coming days, we will return everything, right down to the last shell. Of course, the joke being that they're going to return them as, fired out of a piece of artillery. And that's how they return those shells that the Ukrainians have that the Russians have kindly given them. But yeah, some really good trolling from Defense of Ukraine and other Ukrainian official Twitter accounts. I won't talk about. There are mass graves being found in Izium. It's all rather complicated. Is it like Bucha? There are signs of some people being dismembered and hands tied behind their back, or were these sort of mainly people who had died in the conflict, and the burial sites were a bit more formal and a bit nicer than what was found north of Kiev. Is there evidence of war crime? Almost certainly. Just add it to the list of 33,000 logged war crimes at the moment that Russia have been involved in. So yeah, there you go. What I want to do, and I keep promises. I'm gonna talk about how the Russian army is set up tomorrow. But the real takeaway from today is that there's again not a lot of movement. And what does this say? What does this say that there's not a lot of movement? What are the Ukrainians doing? Why are they not capitalizing on momentum here? We understand in Kherson it's slow movement because it's an attritional battle. But elsewhere, are they building up troops here for an attack down to Mariupol way? Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Anyway, hopefully that was somewhat useful for you. There is often so much going on that it is very difficult to keep abreast of everything. There's so much I want to talk about, the nice little rabbit holes here and there. But that's a little overview. Not a lot happening, but still probably a lot happening that we don't know about. Again, there are information blackouts, so it's unsurprising that we don't have full knowledge. And the Ukrainians must be sort of consolidating their forces for something. Something's going to happen. You can feel it in the air. Anyway, as ever, question everything, particularly things I say. I could well be wrong. Use an array of sources to find out your information. But thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit that bell or whatever they say, all that kind of stuff. You can join. You can give thanks using the thanks tool. You can buy me a coffee. There's a link below for buying me a coffee if you appreciate this. It all helps, and thank you so much to my channel members who will be listed at the end of this recording. Anyway, toodle pips until tomorrow. Bye bye.